Before there was blue sky, before there were oceans, even before time itself could be measured, there was only silence, waiting to breathe. In the endless darkness, billions of years ago, a small planet spun quietly among the stars. Earth, at that time, was not the world we know. Its surface glowed red with molten fire, oceans of lava boiled endlessly, and the air was thick with poisonous gases. There was no breath, no sound, no life. Only lightning storms flashing across black skies and the roar of a young planet finding its form. Yet within this chaos, something miraculous began to happen. Beneath the rain of acid and the heat of volcanic fury, tiny molecules collided, separated, and met again, endlessly, tirelessly, as if learning to compose the first sentence of existence. Scientists would one day call it the primordial soup, the ancient ocean where life first whispered. And within that endless experiment of the universe, one spark of chemistry achieved the impossible, a molecule that could copy itself, the very first breath of what we now call life. Millions of years passed. The earth began to cool. The skies cleared. Sunlight finally touched the young planet's surface, painting the oceans in deep blue. But beneath those waves, in a darkness still untouched by eyes, the earliest forms of life stirred. They were small, single cells drifting through the warm sea, fragile yet eternal in their will to survive. They fed on minerals, on sunlight, on the energy of the earth itself. And over countless generations, they learned to live, to grow, and to multiply. Every bubble that rose from the sea floor was a heartbeat of the newborn planet. Every ray of sunlight that broke through the surface was a promise that life would endure. Then something even more extraordinary happened. Some of these tiny beings began to unite, forming colonies, sharing their strength, building something greater than themselves. From this cooperation came the first multicellular life, and from that moment on, the world would never be the same. From that silent ocean, the roots of all living things began to grow. From one simple cell came trees and fish and birds, and one day, humans who would look back and wonder where it all began. Life did not arrive in an instant. It was shaped slowly, patiently, like water carving stone over millions of years. It was a dance of time and chance, persistence and purpose. Imagine that night in the ancient sea. There was no sound except the murmur of waves and the sigh of wind. Yet if we could listen closely, beyond the silence, beyond the deep, we might hear it, the soft, eternal song of the first life rising from the ocean floor. It was the song of beginnings, a song that has never truly stopped. It continues now in every heartbeat, in every breath, in every leaf that turns toward the sun. Because life, in the end, is not just about where we came from. It's about the miracle that we are still here, breathing, feeling, and dreaming under the same stars that once watched over the first living cell. From a single drop of ancient sea, everything was born. and within us still flows the memory of that first ocean. When the first forms of life learned to breathe, the earth was no longer silent. The world began to sing with the roar of waves, the whisper of wind, and the footsteps of creatures that had never existed before. After billions of years beneath the sea, life had taken hold. The earth transformed into a living stage filled with endless variety. From single cells came corals and jellyfish, strange fish with armored scales, and creatures that glided gracefully through the ocean's depths. Forests rose across the land, vast jungles of towering plants and giant ferns, where insects the size of birds drifted through the humid air. The planet was alive, and in this great surge of life, giants were born. In the wide oceans swam creatures unlike anything we can imagine today. Armored fish with jaws of steel, predators with rows of teeth sharp enough to tear through bone. Some grew to length that dwarfed ships, silent rulers of a blue kingdom without end. And on land, even greater rulers began to appear. The reptiles, massive, magnificent, and destined to become legends. The dinosaurs. Imagine a morning in that ancient world. Mist blankets a forest of ferns. The ground trembles under heavy footsteps. A sauropod, a long-necked giant, tall as a building, moves slowly through the trees, searching for tender leaves at the top of towering branches. Each step shakes the earth. Each breath sends a soft gust of wind across the jungle. But not far away, danger waits. A predator crouches in the shadows, sharp-eyed, patient, silent. When the moment is right, it strikes with terrifying speed. In this world, survival was the only rule, and every creature played its part in the endless circle of life and death. The skies of that era were different too. The air was warm and thick, filled with clouds of vapor rising from the swamps below. Life thrived like never before. Forests grew wild and dense, rivers wound endlessly across the land, and the earth shone with green and gold. Insects spread their wings like living jewels, lizards sprinted across water, and in the oceans, creatures that looked like dragons ruled the depths. It was an age of abundance, wild, strange, and full of wonder. But in the story of nature, every golden age must end. Slowly, change began to creep across the world. Volcanoes erupted, spewing ash that darkened the skies. The climate shifted, temperatures dropped. The great beasts began to struggle. Yet nature never stops. As the mighty fell, smaller creatures rose. Among them were tiny, fur-covered animals, the first mammals. They were not powerful or large, but they had something more precious, the will to survive. They hid in burrows, came out only at night, and cared for their young with gentle warmth. They were small, but clever, and while the giants ruled above, the future quietly waited below, patient in the dark. Then, one day, the sky burned. A light brighter than 1,000 suns streaked across the heavens, and the age of giants came to an end. An asteroid struck the Earth with unimaginable force. Flames swept across the continents. Oceans boiled. Ash filled the sky, blocking out the sun for years. The air grew cold. Plants withered. The mighty fell silent. And so the earth became quiet once again. The footsteps of giants faded from the soil, and the world began to sleep beneath a blanket of ash. But even in destruction, life endured. From the shadows, from the burrows, from the tiniest hearts that had waited so long, came survival. The mammals stepped into the light of a new world, small and trembling, but alive. The age of giants had passed, but its legacy remained, written in stone, buried in bone, and remembered in the story of the earth itself. The age of giants was not merely a time of power, but a lesson that life always finds a way to begin again. After the long silence of the age of giants, the earth began to breathe again. Amid newborn forests and golden savannas, small creatures stood upon two legs, and with that first step, the story of humankind began. When the dinosaurs vanished from the face of the earth, the world fell into a deep, endless quiet. But from within that silence, new footsteps echoed, soft, uncertain, yet filled with purpose. They were not quite animals anymore, but not yet human either. Their bodies were covered in hair, their faces still wild and primal, but behind their eyes, something new was awakening, awareness. They were Australopithecus, the ancient dwellers of Africa, who lived more than 3 million years ago. They learned to walk upright, to hold stones, and to use sticks to gather food. To us, these may seem like simple acts, but to them, it was the dawn of intelligence. Imagine a morning in ancient Africa. Mist blankets the endless grasslands. A mother Australopithecus carries her child, watching the sun rise over the horizon. In the distance, massive creatures roam, giant elephants, ancient zebras, and saber-toothed lions glowing under the amber light. The small ones walk cautiously, not relying on strength, but on wit. They know when to hide, when to move, and how to survive together. And slowly, something inside them grows, a quiet curiosity about the world around them. They begin to notice patterns in the sky, the direction of the wind, the shape of stones, and the fire that crackles when lightning strikes. For the first time in Earth's history, a creature looked at the world and wondered why. Generations passed, and from them emerged a new being, Homo habilis, the skilled human. They broke stones into sharp tools, peeled animal skins, and crafted simple weapons. Every mark they left upon the stone was a whisper of genius, a silent revolution that would change the world forever. From Homo habilis came Homo erectus, the first true wanderers, standing tall and fearless. They left Africa behind, following the call of distant lands. They carried with them tools, courage, and most of all, fire. At night, they gathered around their fires, watching the flames dance in the darkness. The glow reflected in their eyes, bringing warmth, safety, and the birth of imagination. And perhaps in those quiet nights under the stars, something eternal was born, the human soul. Homo erectus did more than survive. They began to imagine. Every light in the sky became a sign, every rock a tool, every flame a symbol of power and mystery. They learned that the world was not merely something to fear, but something to understand. And the more they understood, the more they longed to know. Hundreds of thousands of years later, from that ancient lineage came a new being, Homo sapiens, humans as we know them today. They were dreamers. They painted on cave walls, animals, stars, and symbols we still struggle to decode. Each painting was not just art, It was prayer, memory, and story. It was the human heart speaking for the very first time. Humans were no longer just surviving, they were beginning to mean something. Imagine one of those ancient nights. A family sits by the fire. Children gaze up at the stars. The elders speak of spirits and dreams. The wind hums softly through the cave, carrying laughter and songs from a time before words. That was our beginning. From hands that held stones, from eyes that gazed at the heavens, from hearts that learned to love and to fear, civilization was born. The first humans did not merely learn to survive, they learned to dream. And from those dreams, our world began. When humans learned not only to survive, but to stay, the world changed forever. After hundreds of thousands of years of wandering across plains and forests, the Earth finally entered a gentler age. Ice sheets retreated, rivers widened, valleys blossomed with new life. And in this calmer world, early humans discovered something extraordinary. The Earth was no longer just a place to pass through, it was a home. The first agriculture, a quiet revolution. Imagine an early morning in a soft valley thousands of years ago. Mist hovers above the grass. A woman from the Neolithic era watches tiny seeds slip from her hands into the soil, and days later sees small green sprouts emerging. A miracle, but also a revelation. From that simple observation, the greatest transformation in human history was born. Agriculture. For the first time, humans could create their own food. They no longer followed herds endlessly across the land. They stayed. They built shelter. They planted. They waited. They harvested. And life changed forever. Nights were no longer filled with fear, but with the gentle crackle of fire, the sound of insects, and the warm presence of family gathered together. The river valleys, birthplaces of civilization. As agriculture spread, humans began searching for the most fertile places on Earth, and they found them along rivers. Where water flowed, life flourished, and where life flourished, civilization rose. Sumer, Mesopotamia. Between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humans built the first true cities. They shaped clay into bricks, constructed temples, and wrote the earliest scripts. Mesopotamia was the world's first experiment in urban life. Egypt, the gift of the Nile. Each year the Nile flooded, covering the land with rich black soil. Egyptians learned to control the river, to measure time, and to build monuments that touched the heavens. The Indus Valley, India, and Pakistan. Here, cities were planned with astonishing precision. Straight roads, drainage systems, and large communal baths. Their society was organized, peaceful, and remarkably advanced. Ancient China, along the Yellow River. People cultivated rice, invented early tools, and built traditions that would endure for thousands of years. Dynasties emerged, shaping the identity of one of the world's oldest cultures. Everywhere along the great rivers, humans found the same truth. Water is life, and around water they formed the world's earliest civilizations. Tools, fire, and early technology. With stability came time to think, time to experiment, time to create. Humans discovered fire, shaped stones into sharp tools, and learned to melt copper and tin into bronze. the wheel appeared, a simple circle that revolutionized movement, labor, and trade. Pottery, weaving, fishing nets, and river boats became part of daily life. These were not just tools, they were steps toward mastery of the natural world. Each invention unlocked new possibilities. Cities grew, trade routes emerged, ideas traveled from one settlement to another, and slowly humanity began weaving the fabric of civilization. The power of writing, capturing memory. One of the greatest breakthroughs came from the Sumerians, the invention of writing. They carved symbols into wet clay. At first, the writing served practical needs, counts of grain, lists of workers, records of trade. But writing became much more. It preserved stories, myths, prayers, and memories. For the first time, knowledge could survive beyond a single lifetime. Writing turned time itself into something humans could hold. Leaders, laws, and social order. As villages grew into cities, new challenges emerged. Who would organize the water for irrigation? Who would protect the people? Who would settle disputes? Thus came leaders, from village elders to warrior chiefs, from priests to kings. And with leadership came laws, agreements to maintain peace, structure, and cooperation. Society became more complex. Farmers, artisans, priests, guards, traders, each had a role. And in that complexity, humans discovered a powerful truth. We are stronger together. Early spirituality, humans seeking meaning. At night, ancient people sat around fires, staring at the stars. They wondered, why does the river flood? Why does the sun return each day? What lies beyond death? Their questions gave birth to myths, rituals, and spirituality. They worshipped the sun, moon, rain, wind, and ancestors. They built temples, carved idols, and created ceremonies to explain the mysteries of the world. In searching for meaning, humans began shaping the earliest forms of culture and belief. The dawn of civilization. Civilizations of the river valleys were the foundation of everything that would follow. From these early societies came agriculture, architecture, cities, trade, writing, law, spirituality, scientific curiosity. What began as a small village by the river became the blueprint for empires, nations, and the modern world. In the gentle rhythm of the rivers, humanity found its future, and from quiet villages rose the first sparks of civilization. In the stillness of an ancient night, when the wind carried the cool scent of damp leaves and the soft murmur of rivers echoed like the lullaby of the earth itself, a small discovery changed the destiny of humankind. This chapter takes you back to an age when early humans barely understood the world around them, yet step by step they learned to shape it, beginning with a single spark on a cold, unforgiving night. Imagine a colossal prehistoric forest, sprawling endlessly under a sky untouched by civilization. Towering trees rise like pillars of a forgotten temple, guarding secrets older than memory. Layers of dried leaves form a natural carpet that crunches softly under cautious footsteps. And within this shadowy wilderness, a small group of early humans huddles together, their bodies shivering against the biting night air. They do not yet know warmth beyond the sun. They do not know light beyond the moon and stars. For them, the world is divided into two simple states: the brightness of day and the impenetrable, living darkness of night. But on this night, something extraordinary is about to happen. A streak of lightning rips across the sky, blinding, immediate, and violent. It strikes a massive fallen tree in the distance. The thunder that follows rolls like the roar of a giant creature awakening from slumber. The humans freeze, their hearts pounding, every instinct telling them to flee. Yet what grew from that scorched tree was not a beast, nor a threat, but a miracle. Tiny orange tongues flickered along the cracked bark, dancing delicately as though alive. It moved without limbs, shimmered without breath, and yet radiated something powerful, something hypnotic. They had never seen anything like it, but you and I know its name: fire. The group approached slowly, fear pulsing in their chests. The glow was warm, comforting, in a way they had never known in the night. They reached their hands cautiously towards it, feeling a gentle heat unlike anything the dark world had ever offered them. But fire also bit back. When one ventured too close, the sting of heat shocked him, pulling a startled cry from his throat. They retreated for a moment, confused and trembling. Yet among them stood one figure. Not stronger, not faster, but more daring, more curious. He stepped closer again. He noticed dry branches scattered nearby, weathered by months of sun. Guided by instinct more than understanding, he placed one of the branches into the glowing flame. And then something magical happened. The fire followed the branch, as if hungry, alive, and eager to grow. This was the first moment humans realized fire could be moved, kept, controlled. Throughout the night, they sat around the flame, watching it dance as though the universe had given them a companion in the darkness. Their shadows trembled behind them, alive in the fire's glow. The forest around them remained silent, cautious, subdued by the presence of this strange new light. Predators kept their distance. The night no longer swallowed them whole. The babies in the group slept more soundly than ever before, wrapped in a warmth that seemed almost divine. When dawn finally broke across the horizon, the humans felt something they had never felt before: ownership. This strange, living glow belonged to them because they had learned to feed it, to protect it. In the days that followed, they guarded the fire as though it were a child. When rain threatened, they sheltered its embers under stone crevices. When fuel ran low, they ventured farther and farther into the forest to bring dried leaves and fallen branches. Fire slowly became the center of their world, the heart of their tribe, the root of their stories. And from this moment, everything began to change. Food became safer. Meals became easier to chew. Bodies grew stronger. Brains grew sharper. Humanity began to evolve at a pace the world had never seen before. All of it from a single lightning strike on a forgotten night. From the courage of the first human who dared to approach something dangerous, yet mesmerizing. From a tiny flame protected with devotion. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember that every lamp in your room, every warm meal, and every glowing ember in your life traces its lineage back to that ancient spark in a prehistoric forest. So let the calm night wrap around you the way fire once wrapped early humans in warmth. Imagine the soft orange glow flickering in the dark, and the first keepers of fire discovering their place in this vast, mysterious world. The night settles softly over the ancient world, wrapping the vast, prehistoric forest in a cool, whispering calm. Moonlight drifts through the towering branches of trees older than civilizations, painting silver lines across the forest floor. Somewhere between the shadows and the faint glow of the sky, a small band of early humans moves quietly. They carry no metal weapons, no modern tools, only sharpened wooden spears and the instinctive courage carved by survival. This is the era when humans were not yet rulers of the land. They were not apex predators. They were small players in a world teeming with powerful beasts. Saber-toothed cats, giant bison, towering ground sloths, and packs of ancient wolves. Yet, hidden beneath their physical frailty lay something transformative: intelligence and cooperation. This chapter takes you back to the age when humanity learned to hunt not with brute strength, but with patience, strategy, and the power of unity. It was a turning point in evolution, the moment humans began to rise from prey to hunter. The forest, their first teacher. Every morning, early humans awakened with a single purpose: to find food. There were no granaries, no farms, no long-term storage. Each day was a new challenge, a new fight for survival. The forest became their school. They learned its patterns quietly, almost reverently, where ancient deer wandered when the sun dipped low, how massive bison gathered near river bends, how saber-toothed tracks faded near rocky outcrops, when giant birds hunted the grassy plains. From these patterns, humans learned the invisible rules of their world. They learned to read the ground, to follow the wind, to listen to the shifting rustle of the trees. Every day sharpened their senses. Every moment trained their intuition. The forest was harsh, but it was also their greatest teacher. Strength in numbers, the evolution of teamwork. Early humans realized one essential truth: alone, they were vulnerable, but together, they were something extraordinary. They formed hunting teams where everyone had a role: the agile youths who climbed rocks to scout ahead, the strongest members who held the weighted spears, the quietest trackers who read the soil and followed clues, the elders who remembered the migration routes of animals across seasons. It wasn't their bodies that made them capable hunters, it was their unity. Their success came from planning, from communication, using gestures and vocal calls, from a shared understanding that their future depended on one another. Through cooperation, they began to rise. The pressure of the moment. Imagine the minutes before the hunt begins. The quiet tension, the rhythmic breathing, the distant tremble of hooves crushing dried leaves, the sharp scent of a large animal drifting through the humid air. This is the moment where fear and courage collide. One wrong move could turn the hunters into hunted. One loud rustle could alert the prey and waste an entire day of effort. But in these moments, something remarkable happens within the early human mind. Adrenaline sharpens their awareness. Fear focuses their thoughts, The world feels slower, clearer, deliberate. They measure distance. They angle their spears. They move as one body with many legs, many eyes, many breaths. And then, when the moment is right, they strike together. Not with overwhelming strength, but with accuracy, with timing, with unity. That is what makes early humans dangerous, not their muscles, but their minds. The hunt that shaped evolution. Every successful hunt meant survival, full stomachs, energy for the cold nights, nourishment for the children, strength for defending the tribe. But it meant much more than that. With meat, bodies grew stronger. With animal brains and fats, human brains developed rapidly. With hides, they crafted the first protective clothing. With bones, they carved new tools. Hunting was not just about food. It was the engine of human evolution. It forced humans to plan, to predict, to coordinate, and to innovate. Each thrown spear was a step forward in cognitive evolution, proof that humans were beginning to reshape the world around them. They were not just hunting animals, they were hunting knowledge, skill, and the future. A night after the hunt. When night fell, the group gathered around the fire, the heart of their survival. The flames glowed softly, illuminating their tired faces. They roasted the day's hunt, letting the smell drift gently through the still night air. Children slept soundly, their bellies full and dreams warm. The adults whispered stories, primitive tales, spoken through gestures, grunts, and early rhythmic sounds. These small stories, exchanged in firelight, would one day become myths, legends, and eventually the seeds of culture. In the safety of the glowing flames, humanity felt something rare in the prehistoric world: peace. For a moment, the forest was no longer an enemy, it was home. Hunters of more than just food. As humans improved at hunting, they gained something precious: time. Time to make better tools, time to teach their children, time to watch the stars and wonder what lay above, time to dream. Hunting shaped human identity. It shaped community. It shaped the mind. For every plan they made, every gesture they understood, every coordinated movement they executed, they were building the foundation of human intelligence. They were not just hunting animals, they were hunting knowledge, skill, and the future. As you drift to sleep tonight, imagine these early humans sitting beneath a sky untouched by modern lights, only starlight, firelight, and the soft breaths of a tribe bound by survival. They did not know they were shaping the destiny of their species. They did not know that one day their descendants would build cities, write books, create technology, and speak across the world through invisible waves. All they knew was that to live, they had to work together. And that unity, born in the shadows of ancient forests, became the spark that lifted humanity from fragile wanderers to the architects of the future. They were the first shadow hunters, and because of them, we are here. Under the gentle light of the moon, the prehistoric world looked like a place that never truly slept. The night wind brushed through bushes softly, while the scent of wet soil after rain drifted between the trees. But tonight, something was different. On a small plain overlooking an ancient river, a group of early humans was doing something unusual for their time. They stopped walking. For thousands of years before this, humans moved endlessly, from valley to valley, from forest to grassland, chasing herds of animals, searching for roots and fruits, fleeing from danger. Their lives were a never-ending cycle of movement and uncertainty. But tonight, for the first time, after a long journey filled with risks, they found something that made their feet unwilling to take another step. A place that was safe, rich, and full of promise. The reasons to stay. Under the colors of dusk, a great river flowed slowly. Its water was clear, reflecting the soft pink of the sky, and inside it swam small fish that had no fear. Not far from the river, wide meadows were filled with wild plants that could be eaten. Around them, tall trees offered natural protection. But most importantly, this place was peaceful. Far from the dens of large predators, far from dangerous cliffs and swamps, and it had a water source that never dried up. Early humans finally found something that felt almost like a blessing in the harsh ancient world. They decided to stay. Not forever, because they didn't yet know that concept, but for far longer than ever before. The birth of the first camp. They began gathering tree branches, bark, large leaves, and long sticks. In the dim glow of the evening fire, those primitive hands worked with slow but determined movements. This was the moment when the earliest form of human homes began to emerge. At first, it was only a circular pile of branches, like a giant bird's nest. But day by day, the structure evolved. They reinforced its sides with soft clay taken from the riverbank. They added animal hides to shield against the wind. They created a small opening at the top to let smoke escape without extinguishing the fire. That first home wasn't perfect, not sturdy, not entirely warm. But for early humans, it was the first place that gave them a feeling they had never known before. A feeling of going home. When children began to laugh. In a nomadic life, children were always carried along in exhausting journeys. They were held, pulled, and watched closely because every new place brought new dangers. But in this small settlement, something changed. For the first time, children could play more freely. They ran around the riverbanks. They splashed water with their tiny hands. They collected smooth stones and unique leaves. Their laughter, though soft and broken, filled the camp like music. The adults began to realize how precious a place was that allowed children to grow without fear. This was when humans began to understand a new concept in their lives: the future. Roles that began to take shape. With a more stable camp, early humans started organizing their lives in a more structured way. Some adults kept the fire burning throughout the night. Others crafted tools from bone and stone. Women gathered wild plants and nourishing roots. Strong hunters brought back meat from increasingly efficient hunts. Cooperation shifted from mere necessity into a way of life, into culture, into the foundation that would one day give birth to villages, cities, and civilizations. And it all began from this small camp built by a quiet river. What happens when night falls? Firelight danced softly on the first night they stayed. The smell of roasting meat slowly filled the air. Long shadows swayed on the walls of their simple homes, as if dancing along with the flame. The sound of the river became a natural backdrop, calming, like the whisper of the world saying, "Here, you are safe." The adults sat in a circle, just like generations before them. But this time, there were no plans to move the next morning, no preparations for a long journey. There were only simple stories about that day, about the animal they caught, the plants they found, the parts of the house that needed fixing. And in the midst of all that, there was a new warmth, not just from the fire, but from the togetherness that began to grow stronger. The first signs of culture. When a group of humans stayed long enough in one place, small things began to appear that never had the chance to develop when life was constantly on the move. Some began drawing simple patterns on the ground. Some collected beautiful stones for no clear reason. Some made necklaces from small bones. Some carved lines onto wooden branches. This was the beginning of art, the beginning of expression, the beginning of the human soul expanding. A home was not just a place to live. A home became a place to become. A step toward the future. Night grew deeper. A gentle breeze blew from the river, carrying a soothing coolness. The fire began to dim, leaving small embers glowing quietly. In this small camp, early humans slept with a sense of safety, perhaps for the first time in their long history. They did not know that the simple actions of building a home, settling down, forming a camp, and growing togetherness would become the foundation of everything to come. Settlements, agriculture, civilization, and eventually our world today. And it all began on this quiet night, on the gentle riverbank, among small, fragile homes filled with hope. Here, humans stopped walking and began building the future. Imagine the warm evening breeze brushing across a vast plain where wild herds once roamed freely. Now, on this very land, something that would forever change the course of human history was beginning to take shape, quietly, slowly, but inevitably. This was the age when humans no longer wandered endlessly, but began to anchor their lives into the earth. The time when the first seeds of civilization were planted, not by great machines or mighty empires, but by the humble hands of our ancestors. From wanderers to earth keepers, For tens of thousands of years, humans lived as nomads, moving with the seasons and following the paths of their prey. But as the climate shifted after the Ice Age, something began to change. Grasses that once passed unnoticed now drew attention. Seeds that fell to the ground and sprouted again taught humans their first lessons about the cycle of life. Hunter-gatherers slowly realized that they could shape the environment, not just follow it. They scattered seeds near their shelters. They selected plants that grew the best. They stored grains for future seasons. Without knowing it, they were beginning one of the greatest revolutions in human history, the agricultural revolution. Like all monumental changes, it didn't happen overnight. It came gradually, like dawn lifting the darkness. A campfire that became the center of the world. With farming, humans stopped wandering. The campfire that once burned only for a night now glowed in the same place every day. Children could grow up without traveling miles each week. Elders could age in peace near the same river they played beside in their youth. One quiet afternoon, in a freshly cleared field, a young woman placed a flat stone on the ground and crushed wild wheat with another stone, an early ancestor of flour making. Near her, a man repaired a fishing net. A dog, once a wild wolf, curled lazily in the sun, now a loyal companion. The world was no longer a place to pass through. It had become a home. Early villages, small communities that changed everything. As people settled, they began building the earliest forms of villages. There were no towering walls or paved streets, only round clay houses, thatched roofs, and simple boundaries. Yet it was in these humble places that the grand ideas of humanity were born. Ancient villages like Jericho, Çatalhöyük, and early settlements along Southeast Asian coasts became the first classrooms where humans learned to store harvests in granaries, domesticate goats and sheep, create irrigation channels, and work together as a community. Villages taught them something more powerful than stone tools or spears: cooperation. For the first time, humans realized that they could actively create their future. A new rhythm of life: seasons, tides, and time. Through farming, humans became deeply connected to the rhythms of the earth. They learned to read clouds, predict rain, and understand when the sun's heat would become too harsh. They crafted simple calendars based solely on the observation of night skies. To our ancestors, the stars were not just points of light, they were markers of time. Every season brought hope, every harvest brought gratitude, every failure taught caution. Farming was not just a way to survive, it was a way to understand the world. The birth of professions and new skills. As settled life grew, not everyone had to work in the fields. Some people became tool makers, creating stone axes with greater precision. Some shaped pottery to store food. Some crafted bracelets from bone, copper, or stone, not for survival, but for beauty. For the first time, humans had free time, and from that free time came art. Paintings, carvings, music. These early villages became the birthplace of human creativity. People discovered that life wasn't only about surviving, but about expressing. Every house held its own story. In the kitchen corner, Traces of smoke from thousands of meals lingered. On the clay walls, the handprint of a child remained, a child who likely grew up long before the house collapsed. In the granary, seeds remained preserved from generations past. Those homes may have been fragile, perhaps long gone today, but they formed the foundation of every city, nation, and civilization that followed. Everything we build today, skyscrapers, highways, bustling cities, began with small houses in quiet fields thousands of years ago. Villages became communities. Communities became traditions. Over time, early villages formed traditions. There were harvest rituals, songs to call for rain, and stories about the creation of the world. Drums made of animal skin echoed each night as the whole village gathered to celebrate their success in making life grow from the soil. These traditions became social glue that connected the past with the future. Early villages were more than settlements. They were identity, memory, and roots for the generations that followed. The beginning of all beginnings. As night deepens and the breeze carries the scent of damp earth, you can almost feel the presence of our ancestors walking their fields thousands of years ago. They never knew that their small steps, planting seeds, building homes, domesticating animals, would become the foundation of human civilization. Yet through their simplicity, the world as we know it began to form, because every grand city, every kingdom, every science, art, and technology we enjoy today started from a single seed planted long ago, and from a tiny village built with clay, straw, and hope. Night descended slowly upon an ancient valley. The last orange light of the sun faded behind low hills, leaving the sky tinted purple and sprinkled with the first emerging stars. In the middle of the plain, a small flicker danced, not lightning, not the dying ember of a forest fire, but something born from human hands. It was the fire of an early metal hearth, a place where a new world was beginning to form. Imagine the gentle hum of prehistoric wind, the warm scent of sun-baked soil, and the tiny sparks flying from stones as they were struck again and again. This is where the story of this chapter begins. In an age when humans discovered something that would transform the way they hunted, built, farmed, traded, and viewed their place in the world. This was the dawn of the age of metals. The first clues when stone was no longer enough. For tens of thousands of years, stone had been humanity's trusted companion. From stone, they crafted axes, blades, spears, and various simple tools. But as human populations grew and life became more complex, with fields, livestock, and permanent settlements, the need for stronger, more durable tools grew with it. One night, perhaps by accident, a piece of mineral-bearing rock fell into a fire. When the flames died and the ash cooled, someone found something strange. A small, shimmering lump, harder than common stone, and shapeable. This was the first spark of metallurgy. Some regions discovered copper first, and later mixed it with tin to create bronze. Much later, humans learned to tame a far stronger material, iron. Each metal brought its own revolution. Fire, hammer, and the breath of the first smiths. In a small riverside settlement, a man stood near a simple clay furnace. His hands were blackened with soot, his eyes red from smoke, but his face shone with awe. In front of him, pieces of copper ore melted slowly, turning from solid stone into glowing red liquid. He did not know the name of the process, nor did he understand the chemistry behind fire transforming rock into molten metal. He only knew one thing. He was witnessing a miracle. Using primitive stone tools, he poured the glowing liquid into a clay mold. When it cooled, it became a small blade, far sharper and more durable than anything he had created from stone. These early smiths seemed almost magical. Their hands produced tools that would lead humanity into the future. Every piece of metal that left the furnace marked a new step in human history. New tools, new lives. Metal changed everything. Farming became easier with stronger hoes and cutting tools. Hunting became more efficient with sharper spearheads and arrows. Home building improved with carving tools and early metal fasteners. Intergroup conflicts grew more intense as metal weapons carried new power. Yet not all changes brought danger. Many brought stability. Villages could grow without fear of running out of tools. Land could be cleared faster. Food became more plentiful, and populations increased. Smiths became central figures. They were not merely workers, they were guardians of knowledge. Every ring of metal they forged echoed the birth of a new era. Trade, when the world became wider. As metal use spread, humans realized something important. No single region contained all the resources they needed. Copper was found in one area, tin in another, obsidian somewhere else, and salt, a vital substance, far away in different lands. This gave rise to prehistoric trade networks. Imagine someone walking hundreds of kilometers carrying a pouch of shiny black obsidian, trading it in a distant camp for copper ore, then exchanging that again for salt or animal skins. These routes stretched from Mesopotamian valleys to Anatolian coasts, across the steppes of Central Asia, and even through the islands of ancient Southeast Asia. Trade brought far more than goods. It brought new ideas, technologies, languages, and cultural influences. From one small village, humans became connected to a world much larger than they ever imagined. Boats, footpaths, and invisible highways. To support trade, humans created better means of travel. Along major rivers, they crafted simple skin boats and wooden canoes. On land, they formed narrow footpaths that eventually became established routes. These paths were the ancestors of modern roads. This invisible network of trade routes sparked something new in the human spirit, the desire to explore. From small canoes drifting along the Euphrates to bamboo rafts gliding across Southeast Asian rivers, humans slowly transformed from creatures that merely survived into seekers, wanderers, and discoverers. Metal art, when beauty and strength became one. Once basic needs were met, humans began using metal for gentler purposes. Art. They crafted bronze bracelets, copper necklaces, tiny figurines, decorative clothing pieces, ceremonial masks. Beauty became part of life. Metal, once used only for survival, became a medium for celebration. Every carving was a story. Every small figurine was a prayer. Every bracelet symbolized status, hope, or protection. Here, art and technology became one, the fire that never truly died. In the heart of the village, the metal furnace glowed almost every day. Smoke rose into the sky, a silent message proclaiming that humans were no longer merely accepting the world as it was, they were changing it. The fire in that furnace became a symbol of something greater, the human will to progress. When night came and the village quieted, the smiths sat beside the furnace, feeling its fading warmth. They knew that copper and iron were not simply materials, they were extensions of human hands and extensions of human dreams. A world beginning to widen. Late night settled in. A gentle breeze carried the scent of earth warmed by the day's sun. The stars glittered like tiny lights, marking trade routes across the sky. In this increasingly busy prehistoric world, humans were no longer tied to a single place, a single river, or a single valley. They were now connected through metal, fire, and movement. This was a new world, the first truly interconnected world, even in its simplest form. And it all began with a tiny spark, a piece of ore falling into the flames. The night is calm. The air drifts softly, carrying the scent of damp soil and young leaves. A distant chorus of insects hums in the darkness, like the last lullaby of the ancient world. A world we have followed from the birth of fire, the first hunts, the earliest shelters, and the rise of human communities. Tonight, our journey enters its final chapter of the prehistoric era, the moment when humanity steps out of mere survival and begins shaping a world of its own. So breathe slowly, let your mind soften, and allow this story to guide you across millennia, toward the moment when humans take their first steps into civilization. 1. A world no longer wild. The earth began to change. The massive sheets of ice that once dominated continents gradually retreated. Rivers broadened, forests thickened, and fertile plains stretched across valleys and basins. Humanity, which had wandered endlessly across harsh lands, suddenly found itself in a world gentler than before. A world that offered not only danger, but opportunity. Hunters who had roamed from place to place noticed patterns. Certain animals returned to the same grazing grounds. Specific plants grew again and again in familiar locations. Wild grains appeared in the same seasons every year. For the first time, humans recognized order within nature. And with that realization came a new idea. Quiet, subtle, but revolutionary. They could stay. They could settle. They could prepare for a future bigger than the next day's survival. This was the beginning of the greatest transformation in human history. 2. The first seeds. A silent revolution. No one knows who first planted a seed knowingly. Maybe it was a woman carrying grains in a woven pouch who dropped a handful near a camp. Maybe it was a child playing with soil. Maybe a hunter noticed plants sprouting where animals had trampled the ground. But at some point, humans understood something profound. Seeds grow when placed in the earth. What followed was not a sudden explosion, but a gradual, unstoppable revolution. For the first time in over 2 million years, humans were not simply finding food, they were producing it. Small patches of cultivated land appeared: wheat, barley, peas, lentils, tubers. Women who had long gathered wild plants became guardians of this new source of life. Knowledge of soil, seasons, rainfall, and cycles began to grow. They learned to save seeds, to clear land, to wait and plan months ahead. And at night, around fires that now burned in the same places over and over again, humans spoke of a new kind of miracle. That food came not from chance, but from their hands. Agriculture was not mere discovery. It was the beginning of intentional living, the foundation of civilization. 3. The first animals who chose humans. With crops came new responsibilities. Fields needed protection from predators, thieves, and wandering animals. That was when the bond between humans and animals transformed forever. Dogs were the first to approach. They came attracted by the smell of cooked meat, scraps, and warmth. At first, both species kept their distance, but night after night, camp after camp, they grew closer. Dogs found safety and food. Humans found allies, eyes in the dark, companions for hunting, and guardians for the camp. This was not merely domestication. It was the birth of one of the oldest friendships on Earth. Later came goats, sheep, pigs, and cattle. Humans began to rely on them for milk, meat, hides, and labor. For the first time, humanity had reliable, renewable resources. And with stable food, populations grew. Groups expanded. Villages emerged. 4. The first villages where history truly begins. Agriculture led humans to settle. Settling led them to build, and building led them to dream. Small clusters of houses appeared, first made from branches and hides, then clay, then stone. Roofs became stronger, walls thicker, doors more secure. Night after night, fires burned, not because people needed to keep moving, but because they finally had a place to return to. The first villages marked a turning point. Humans created home. And with home came the concept of ownership. A field belonged to a family. A herd belonged to a household. A storehouse was shared by the community. A well followed rules and turns. From ownership came order. From order came leadership. From leadership came the earliest social structures humanity ever knew. The world was changing, no longer shaped by nature alone, but by human decisions. 5. New tools, new skills, new worlds. Settled life demanded creativity. Humans began making objects that had never existed. Clay pots hardened in fire. Stone sickles sharp enough to harvest rows of grain. Woven baskets capable of holding entire seasons' worth of food. Mortar and pestle for grinding flour. Simple plows drawn by early domesticated animals. They developed weaving, spinning, carpentry, and early medicine. And then came one of humanity's greatest innovations, The wheel. It did not appear suddenly. It evolved from wooden rollers used to move heavy loads. But when it appeared, it changed everything, from transport to trade. For the first time, humans were not simply passengers in nature. They were inventors. 6. Language deepens. Stories grow. With stability and food security came time. Time to think, to observe, and to imagine. Stories became more intricate. Languages grew richer. Symbols began appearing on pottery, stones, and bones, marks that carried meaning, memory, identity. These symbols were not yet writing, but they were the seeds from which writing would eventually bloom. Rituals emerged, beliefs solidified. The concept of ancestors, spirits, gods, and creation began weaving itself into daily life. The earliest cultures were forming, and through them, humanity began to understand itself. 7. New challenges, conflict, and disease. But civilization's birth came with shadows. Crowded settlements attracted problems never seen before. Conflict. With land now valuable, territory became worth fighting for. Raids began, small at first, then larger as groups expanded. Defensive walls of timber and earth appeared around villages. Disease. Living close to others and to animals allowed sickness to spread more easily. Illnesses that were rare among nomads now became common. But humans adapted. Herbal medicines were discovered. Healers became recognized members of society. Communities developed rules to protect the vulnerable. Humanity was learning that progress carried consequences, yet they pushed forward. 8. Rivers, valleys, and the first cities. Some settlements grew faster than others, especially those near large rivers. Rivers brought water, fertile soil, fish, clay, trade routes, and protection. From these advantages came the world's first major centers of population. Villages grew into towns. Towns grew into early cities. And cities brought new roles never seen before. Warriors, potters, carpenters, leaders, spiritual guides, traders, builders. Human life was no longer defined by survival alone. It was defined by purpose. Then came monuments, stones arranged in patterns, pillars erected as symbols, structures built as offerings or memorials. Humanity, for the first time, wanted to leave something permanent behind. 9. A giant step toward the future. By this era, humanity had crossed the threshold. No longer creatures drifting with the wind, no longer hunters wandering through forests and tundra. They had become architects of their world. Fire was no longer simple warmth. It was a kiln, a forge, a tool for creation. The sky was no longer feared. It became a compass, a calendar, a source of myths. Communities were no longer temporary. They were generational, permanent, expanding. human minds reached farther. Human dreams grew larger. This was the final stage of prehistory, the moment just before writing, kingdoms, and recorded history would begin. 10. Closing reflections. From darkness to dawn. Humanity's journey from caves to cities is one of the most extraordinary transformations in the history of life. No other creature reshaped its world so dramatically. No other species built its destiny from earth, stone, fire, and imagination. Tonight, as you listen to this story, perhaps you can feel the echoes of those ancient humans, their breaths, their hopes, their fears, their victories. Because the truth is simple. We are them. They live in us. Their first sparks of fire live in our technology. Their first seeds live in our agriculture. Their first homes live in our cities. Their first stories live in our cultures. And just like them, we keep moving toward light, toward knowledge, toward the vast future waiting beyond the horizon. The prehistoric age ends here, but humanity's story has only just begun.